2 teenage sisters, 1 boarding gate, and a flight they were never meant to miss. But what happens when you're denied, not because of a policy, but because of who you are? Kaelis and Rivah Solenne were just trying to get home. First-class tickets in hand, perfectly dressed, polite, calm, everything right. Still, the gate agent looked past them, the flight attendant brushed them off, and the captain, well, he made a decision that would shake the skies. What secret were they hiding? Why did a single phone call bring an entire airline to a halt? And who really holds the power at 30,000 feet? This is not just a story about race or airlines. It's about what happens when quiet strength refuses to be ignored. When the calmest voice in the room carries the greatest impact. Get ready for a story of dignity, resistance, and justice set entirely on a plane, but rooted in something much deeper. If you believe some stories are meant to change the system, not just survive it, like, share, and subscribe now, because you won't want to miss what happens next. Now, buckle up. The flight is about to take off. The soft murmur of voices rose and fell around Gate 27B at the Coral View International Airport. It was early morning, yet the air buzzed with quiet urgency rolling luggage, polite smiles, the occasional cough of a sleepy traveler. Among them stood 17-year-old twins, Kaelis and Rivah Solenne, both dressed in casual but coordinated travel wear denim jackets, sweats, and backpacks heavier than their frames suggested. They had been up since before dawn, but excitement danced in Rivah's amber-flecked eyes. "This is it," Rivah said, bouncing slightly on her heels. "Flight NA 777. All the way to Lucent Bay. First class. Baby." Kaelis smiled, more subdued, but no less thrilled. "Don't jinx it." They approached the gate with their digital boarding passes ready. Kaelis was the first to hand her phone to the gate agent. A woman with tightly coiled hair pulled into a bun and a name tag that read Nolra Keene. Nolra didn't smile. Her eyes flicked over the screen, then up at Kaelis, then down again. "I don't see your name on this manifest," Nolra said, voice clipped. Kaelis blinked. "I'm sorry." Nolra turned to Rivah. "Yours either?" Rivah tilted her head, confused. "That's not possible. Our father booked these tickets days ago. First class, Novus Air, NA 777 to Lucent Bay." Nolra offered a practiced half smile, the kind that covered irritation with forced professionalism. "I'm sure you believe that, but according to our system, you don't have a reservation. You'll need to step aside." Kaelis felt her chest tighten. "Can you check again, Draven Solenne? He's our father. He handles the bookings." Nolra raised an eyebrow. Draven Solenne Rivah rolled her eyes. "Yes, you know, CEO of Novus Air." Something shifted in Nolra's posture, a mix of disbelief and challenge. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to stop causing a disruption. Now step aside so I can board the other passengers." A few travelers behind them shifted uncomfortably. Kaelis could feel eyes on them, the telltale rustle of judgment crackling through the terminal air. She took a slow breath and tried to stay calm. "Could you at least recheck the reservation? Maybe there was a system error." Nolra's smile thinned into something colder. "Look, you can't just say you're the daughters of someone important and expect to jump the line. I'm not going to argue with you. Now move." Kaelis looked over at Rivah, who was visibly fuming. "This is ridiculous," Rivah whispered. "You saw the confirmation email this morning, didn't you?" Kaelis nodded and dug out her phone. "Right here. Flight NA 77. 2 first-class seats. Booked under Draven Solenne's corporate account." Nolra barely glanced at the screen. "That could be forged. We've had scammers before." "Scammers," Rivah barked. "We're 17. You think we hacked a corporate email just to sit in a seat we already paid for?" A tall man in a pressed uniform stepped over. His pilot's stripes glinted under the fluorescent lights. Captain Marl Thorne, according to the embroidery on his jacket. "Is there a problem here?" he asked. "Yes." Rivah snapped before Kaelis could say anything. Apparently, being black and flying first class is enough of a reason to be denied boarding. Thorne narrowed his eyes but turned to Nolra. "Are they on the manifest?" Nolra folded her arms. "No, and they're becoming aggressive, claiming to be the CEO's daughters." Kaelis raised her voice, still calm, but with an edge of strain. "We're not claiming. We are. We didn't choose this airline to show off we were born into it. I suggest you call security," Nolra said. The words hit Kaelis like a slap. She exchanged a panicked glance with Rivah. She could already feel the ground shifting, the sharp click of radios, the edge of threat behind every polite command. Rivah stepped forward. "Go ahead. Call security." Or better yet, Kaelis grabbed her arm. "Don't," she whispered. "Not here. Not like this." But Rivah was already dialing. Captain Thorne looked uncertain. "If this is true, it will be dealt with internally. But I can't delay the flight." "That's fine," Rivah said into the phone. "We'll delay it ourselves." Kaelis watched her twin speak. Her voice measured. Professional. The kind of voice she had only heard when their father took them into boardrooms as teens to observe operations. The kind of voice that made things happen. She said one name, Dad. And Kaelis saw Nolra pale. Rivah held the phone to her ear like it was a sword drawn in a silent duel. Kaelis, though still stiff from the sting of being dismissed and humiliated, watched her sister with a mixture of anxiety and admiration. Rivah wasn't backing down. Not today. "Dad," Rivah said again. "We're at gate 27B. They're saying we're not on the list." There was a pause. The muffled bass of Draven Solenne's voice coming through. Too deep for Kaelis to hear the words, but the tone was unmistakable, alert, commanding, sharp. "No, they're threatening to call security," Rivah added, her voice cracking now, fury and pain mixing into something more raw. "Yes, yes. She said we forged the confirmation email." Kaelis glanced at Nolra Keene, who was standing just beyond the boarding gate scanner with her arms crossed. The gate agent didn't even try to look apologetic. Her whole posture screamed authority, entitlement, dismissal. The subtle rustle of passengers behind them whispers. Phones raised discreetly cut through the moment like invisible thorns. "We're not making a scene," Rivah continued, "but they are, and everyone's watching now." Kaelis stepped closer to the phone. "Can you just ask him to speak to her?" she murmured. Rivah nodded, then extended the phone toward Nolra. "He'd like a word." Nolra hesitated. It was a split-second standoff. Then she huffed and snatched the phone with a forced smile. "Hello, sir. This is Nolra Keene, with Novus Air." She froze. Kaelis studied her face. It was like watching a mountain shudder. "Yes. Yes, I understand." "No. I hadn't verified that." "No. I didn't check the secure manifest because it... Well, the girls didn't present proper credentials." Her voice faded, meek now. The woman who just moments ago wielded power like a blade was crumbling. Kaelis felt no joy in watching it, only weariness, the kind of tired that lived in bones and skin and history. Nolra handed the phone back, her expression unreadable. "He'd like to speak to you again," she said softly. Rivah took it. "Yeah." Dad Kaelis could hear him now, slightly clearer. "Get comfortable. Girls, you're boarding soon. I'll take care of the rest." Click. The phone call ended like thunder after lightning. but the tension remained. "Your seats are being reinstated," Nolra said without meeting their eyes. "There appears to have been a sync error with the private manifest. We apologize for the inconvenience." Rivah opened her mouth surely to say something fierce, but Kaelis stepped in first. "We'll wait until we're called," she said evenly, gripping her sister's hand. "Thank you." They moved back to the side, past the velvet ropes and murmurs. A woman in a beige blazer lowered her phone, clearly disappointed she hadn't caught a scandal worth sharing online. A man in a navy cap nodded at them, just barely. Rivah crossed her arms. "She humiliated us. Out loud. But the apology's a whisper." Kaelis leaned closer. "And if we fire back now, we're the problem. I don't care, I do." They stood in silence. Behind them, passengers continued boarding. Zone 3, Zone 4, a crying baby, the scrape of a suitcase wheel. Then, a ripple of change. 3 new staff in suits strode up the gate ramp, one of them holding a tablet, another clearly security, and the third wearing the corporate badge of the executive response team. "Ms. Keene," said the one with the tablet, "please step aside for a moment." Kaelis glanced over. Nolra looked stunned. "What's going on?" she asked. "We've received an executive override. You'll need to debrief with corporate compliance." Rivah's jaw dropped. "Oh, my God." A male voice over the intercom broke through the chaos. "Final boarding call for Novus Air Flight NA757 to Lucent Bay. Passengers Kaelis and Rivah Solenne. Please proceed to the gate." They stepped forward. This time, no one blocked them. Kaelis heard murmurs again, but different now. Curious. Confused. "Did you see that? Who are they? Those girls just got the gate agent pulled." As they walked the jet bridge, Rivah reached for her sister's hand. "You think this is over?" Kaelis shook her head. "I think it's just beginning." They stepped into the plane. Rows of seats stretched out, crisp and white under LED lights. A flight attendant greeted them with a stiff smile. "Welcome aboard." They turned left. First class, window seats, champagne already chilled. Kaelis exhaled slowly, settling into the leather. Her pulse was finally slowing down. Rivah, next to her, was still vibrating with anger. She opened her phone and started typing a long note. "I'm documenting all of this, just in case." Kaelis looked out the window. The tarmac was quiet now, but a storm brewed in her mind. She remembered what their father always said: power isn't loud. It's consistent, and today they had seen what silence cost and what it revealed. The cabin hummed with the low murmur of passengers settling into their seats. Overhead bins clunked shut, and the scent of citrus-sanitized leather hung in the air. The flight attendant passed by again with a forced brightness that didn't quite reach her eyes. Kaelis sat perfectly still, eyes closed for a moment, trying to center herself. But the edge of unease still sat on her chest like a weight. Even with their seats reinstated, something about the energy on the plane felt skewed, off balance. Rivah had her phone out again, not texting this time, but scrolling, reading headlines, maybe tweets. Guess what she muttered? Kaelis opened one eye. Somebody caught the gate scene on camera. It's already online. People are talking. Kaelis sat up straighter. That fast Rivah held up the screen. There they were, fuzzy footage of 2 girls at a gate, an agent speaking into a phone, and then being pulled aside by men in suits. The caption read, "Twins denied boarding. 1 call later. Gate agent escorted away." A few thousand likes, dozens of comments. The top one read, "Imagine being that confident. Love it." But further down, Kaelis saw what she expected. Entitled much bet their daddy owns the airline. Probably pulled the race card. Her stomach twisted. "Don't read the comments," she whispered. "I always read the comments," Rivah replied, jaw set. Before Kaelis could respond, a man stepped into the aisle, pausing at their row. He was maybe early 50s, pale, heavy-set, with a weathered face and pressed polo shirt. He looked at the seat number, then at Kaelis, then at Rivah. "You two got bumped up," he asked. Kaelis blinked. "Sorry. My seat," he said, pointing at 3A. "That's mine. I fly this route every week." Rivah frowned. "You sure he pulled out a paper boarding pass? Waving it like a badge. Says it right here." Kaelis leaned over and glanced at her phone. "We're assigned 3A and 3B. The man raised an eyebrow. "Really? That's funny. 'Cause I've had this seat booked for over a month." Kaelis turned her screen slightly. "We just reconfirmed. Corporate override." He exhaled hard, like someone trying to stay calm but boiling just under the surface. "Well, then I guess somebody up there's doing favors." A few nearby passengers turned their heads. The man was still standing in the aisle, not yelling, but radiating something ugly. "You're welcome to check with the crew," Kaelis offered, voice steady. "I'll do that." He walked toward the front. A moment later, they could hear his voice lowered, but sharp talking, to the lead flight attendant. Rivah looked at her sister. You feel that Kaelis nodded slowly. "Yeah, the shift." A few minutes passed. Then the flight attendant returned. "Ladies," she began carefully, "there seems to be a seat assignment issue. Mr. Dalton, he's one of our titanium elite frequent flyers, was originally booked in this row. However, your tickets were reissued with corporate clearance. We're sorting it out now." Rivah tilted her head. "Are we being asked to move?" Nabard, the attendant, said. "We're just reviewing the manifest." Another man nearby leaned over the aisle. He was younger, maybe late 30s, in business casual, holding a black carry-on with a Novus Air tag. "Funny how things go." "Huh," he said with a small smirk. "World turns upside down when strings get pulled." Kaelis looked at him, trying to find a place between politeness and pride. "We're just trying to fly like everyone else," she said. He gave a short laugh. "Sure you are." Kaelis could feel it now, something beyond resentment. A quiet judgment laced through the cabin air, like static. These were the whispers they never quite escaped. "How did you get here? Do you belong here? Did you earn it?" Rivah sat back and crossed her arms. "I'm starting to hate this plane." "I don't think it's the plane," Kaelis replied softly. The intercom chimed. The pilot spoke in a calm drawl. "Good afternoon, folks. This is Captain Morel Thorne. We're finishing up final prep and waiting for clearance to taxi. Should be airborne shortly. Thanks for flying Novus Air." Kaelis recognized the name. Their father had once mentioned Thorne, a career pilot, one of the best. But even he, it seemed, couldn't steer them away from what was bubbling under the surface here. The attendant came back. "Everything's been resolved," she said. "You're confirmed in your seats. Apologies again for the confusion." Kaelis nodded once. "Thank you." As the plane began its slow roll away from the gate, Rivah muttered, "That man's still staring." Kaelis didn't look. "Let him." "I wish they would just say what they're thinking," Rivah hissed, "instead of hiding behind manners and smiles." Kaelis turned to her. If they said what they were thinking, the whole plane would catch fire. Rivah snorted, but it didn't sound like laughter. The wheels turned, and the plane gathered speed. But inside, the tension didn't lift. If anything, it pressed harder against their lungs. Something told Kaelis this flight had only just begun emotionally. socially, and deeply personally. There were 2,000 miles ahead of them, and nowhere to run but forward. The seatbelt sign dinged off. Kaelis leaned back, trying to let the hum of the engine soothe her nerves. The moment the light blinked off, a few passengers unbuckled and shuffled toward the lavatory. Others retrieved laptops or magazines. The flight had reached cruising altitude, but the atmosphere in Cabin A still hadn't leveled. Rivah put in her earbuds but left the music paused. She stared out the window, arms folded. Her fingers tapped silently against her arm. Not from boredom. Kaelis knew that rhythm. It was her sister's version of restraint. "She's back," Rivah muttered without turning. Kaelis followed her gaze. The same flight attendant from earlier, tall, brunette, tight-lipped, was approaching, this time with a tray of drinks. She wore the same polite mask, but held it tighter now. "Something to drink?" she asked. First to Rivah. "I'll take a ginger ale," Rivah said, not smiling. And for you, she turned to Kaelis. "Water, please." As she poured, Kaelis noticed the subtle shift the way the attendant placed the can before Rivah without offering ice. How she paused a beat longer with Kaelis's water, setting it just an inch out of reach. Small things, but deliberate. "Thank you," Kaelis said anyway. The attendant didn't reply. She simply turned and moved to the next row. Rivah gave a low laugh. "Not subtle. Don't bite," Kaelis whispered. "I'm not biting. I'm recording." Rivah tapped her phone screen, voice memo running. "Just in case," she added. Kaelis shook her head slightly, but didn't stop her. She understood. This wasn't just about drinks or seats. It was about something older, heavier, something they carried every time they entered a space not built for them. A voice piped up from behind. "Excuse me, sorry, miss." It was the same man from earlier. "Mr. Dalton." His voice was louder this time. Not yelling, but performative. "This is absolutely ridiculous. I've flown this airline for 15 years. Titanium elite, and I've never seen such disrespect for customer loyalty." The attendant returned to him. "Mr. Dalton, I understand your frustration, but I'm sitting behind teenagers now who pulled strings to steal my seat." A few heads turned. Kaelis felt her stomach knot. Rivah turned, slow and smooth, until she locked eyes with him. "We didn't steal anything," she said, loud enough for others to hear. "Our seats were reassigned by the airline." Dalton leaned forward, one arm on the seatback. "You know what's funny? My daughter applied for an internship at Novus last year. Never even got a call back." Kaelis turned too, but more gently. "I'm sorry to hear that." "Yeah. Well, she didn't have the right connections." A pause. Kaelis could feel a shift, a collective listening. The kind of moment where people weren't sure whether to pretend not to hear or lean in. Dalton wasn't done. "But you girls, you have the look of people who always have someone to call when things don't go your way." Rivah's jaw clenched. "You mean people with a father?" Kaelis reached over and gently touched her sister's hand. "Sir," Kaelis said calmly, "this really isn't the place." Dalton leaned back with a smirk. "Of course not. You already made it your place." A silence fell, like a curtain. Kaelis turned back to face forward. Her heart pounded. She wasn't afraid. But she was angry, and that was more dangerous. Anger made her hands cold, made her words sharp. And sharp words in the wrong setting became weapons. Others would claim they were forced to dodge. Rivah whispered, "If I say anything else, I'll explode." Kaelis nodded. "Then don't. Not yet." The seatbelt light flickered again. turbulence. The captain's voice returned. We're hitting a mild pocket of choppy air. Please remain seated with your belts fastened. Should be brief. Kaelis welcomed the distraction. The sudden jolt through the cabin pressed everyone back into their own bodies, their own rows, a reminder from nature that no one, not even the elite, controlled the sky. But just as she settled back, another voice called from first class. "Excuse me, why are these girls even up here?" It was a new voice, a woman's, clipped, nasal, with pearls around her neck and disdain curled in every syllable. Kaelis exhaled slowly. "Another one." Rivah's voice was icy. "You want to ask us directly?" Kaelis spoke over her. "It's okay. Don't. No, it's not." Rivah snapped. "They're making us targets." The woman didn't respond, but the damage was done. Kaelis felt heat flush her cheeks. She wasn't embarrassed. She was exhausted. It never ended, this second-guessing. These insinuations. Always asked to justify their presence. Always scanned. Scanned again. Even mid-air. 30,000 feet above solid ground. She closed her eyes, but her thoughts raced. Was this what Dad wanted when he pulled strings? Was his help helping or just painting a bigger target? A soft chime? A new announcement? "Ladies and gentlemen," said a measured voice, "this is Captain Thorne again. We'd like to remind passengers to treat fellow travelers and crew with respect. Personal disputes are not to be aired publicly or through commentary on seating assignments. This flight is operated by Novus Air, and every seat, every name on this plane, was approved by our system. If you have a concern, press your call button privately." The message was clear. A few scattered claps followed, but most passengers stayed quiet, unsure how to respond. Even Dalton didn't speak again. The pearl necklace woman turned away. Kaelis opened her eyes. "Think that was about us?" Rivah asked with a half-smile. Kaelis finally smiled back. Only 37 more rows to go. The overhead lights dimmed slightly, shifting the cabin into its soft post-meal glow, the kind meant to lull passengers into a state of calm, where the world outside was just a whisper of wind against aluminum, but inside row 2A and 2B, the pressure hadn't dropped. Rivah sat stiff, her tray table down, untouched ginger ale still sweating in its cup. Kaelis glanced at her sister, watching her jaw twitch the way it always did when she was chewing on anger like stale gum. "You don't have to fight every time," Kaelis said quietly. Rivah turned to her, brows raised. "They're fighting us," she replied. "I'm just not pretending it's fine." Kaelis sighed. "That's not what I'm doing." No, Rivah's voice lowered, but sharpened. "Because it looks like you're playing their game." Smile. "Thank them. Don't make waves." "Because if I don't," Kaelis said, her voice trembling despite her effort to stay calm, "they'll say I'm aggressive, or out of line, or a problem. And then what? Then they don't just talk, they act. They remove us. We've already been removed once today." The words hit like a slap. Kaelis turned away toward the window, blinking hard. For a moment, the only sound between them was the quiet clatter of carts in the galley. Rivah softened. "I'm not trying to fight you, Kay. I'm just tired. Tired of feeling like I have to apologize for taking up space." Kaelis didn't respond at first. But then she said, so softly, it was almost a breath, "Me too." Their silence stretched. Not angry this time, but aching. Then came a voice from behind them. Gentle, masculine, familiar in a way Kaelis couldn't quite place. "If I may, you two carry yourselves with a kind of grace most people never learn." Kaelis turned, startled. The man in 3A leaned forward slightly, middle-aged, in a simple navy button-down, reading glasses perched on his nose. His skin was a rich brown, his voice steady but warm. Rivah narrowed her eyes. "Were you listening?" "To survive in this world, miss," he said kindly. "I've learned to listen before I speak." Kaelis gave a wary smile. "You work in politics." He chuckled. "Finance, actually. But I used to teach." "High school?" Rivah asked. "Harvard Law," he replied without arrogance. They both blinked. "Name's Professor Ezra Winthorne," he added. "You don't know me, but I know who your father is, and I know what he's built." Kaelis stiffened. "We're not here because of him," she said. Ezra nodded. "I believe you, but that doesn't mean others do." He adjusted in his seat. "Let me tell you something," he continued. "My first year teaching at Harvard, I had a colleague pull me aside and say, 'Your students won't respect you unless you dress like you own the place.' I thought he was being helpful, but I came to understand he wasn't talking about clothes. He meant don't act like you belong. Prove it, every day." Rivah frowned. "So what did you do?" "I wore the suit. I taught the class. But I made sure every one of those students left knowing that brilliance didn't have a dress code or a skin tone." Kaelis felt something loosen in her chest. He looked at them both. "You shouldn't have to prove yourselves to anyone on this plane. But if you do, let it be on your terms, not theirs." Rivah leaned back, slowly. Her tension didn't disappear, but it shifted. She studied the man for a long moment, then said, "You're a better seatmate than Mr. Dalton." Ezra chuckled. "That's a low bar, but I'll take it." A faint smile curled at Kaelis's lips. It wasn't triumph. It was something quieter, recognition. Maybe that they weren't entirely alone in this cabin, this sky, this fight. Suddenly, her phone buzzed in her lap. Kaelis glanced down. A message from Diversion Solenne, their father, just landed in New York. "Call me the moment you land, and stay calm." She frowned. Rivah peeked at her screen. "He knows something." Kaelis didn't answer. She was already thinking again. About the woman in pearls. About Mr. Dalton. About how all it took was a few sideways glances and comments for people to start doubting your right to exist where you were. But now, she wasn't just doubting the other passengers. She was doubting herself. Am I playing too small? Am I confusing composure with fear? What would I say if I stopped holding my breath? The engines rumbled, carrying the plane and its passengers forward. But for the first time since they boarded, Kaelis felt herself pausing not to survive, but to consider, what if Rivah was right? What if being quiet wasn't noble? What if it was a cage? She looked at her sister, then at Ezra, then back down at her phone, and somewhere between the hum of the aircraft and the memory of her father's voice, Kaelis Solenne made a quiet decision. She wasn't going to wait until landing to find her voice. She was going to start here, in row 2A, 30,000 feet above the world. The cabin lights brightened slightly as the plane began its slow arc over the Rockies. The turbulence had stopped, but inside Kaelis, something more unpredictable stirred. She sat back, eyes focused not on her screen or the window, but inward. Ezra Winthorne's words echoed in her mind like wind through a canyon. Let it be on your terms. But what were her terms? For so long, Kaelis had been the composed one, the even voice in the storm, the shield her sister could step behind. But what did that calmness cost her? She turned to Rivah, who was half watching a movie and half scanning the aisle like a security hawk. "Riv," Kaelis said gently. Rivah looked over. "I think I'm done being silent." Rivah blinked, then slowly smiled. Took you long enough? Kaelis let out a soft laugh. Then her smile faded. I need to speak to the purser, she said. Rivah sat up straighter. You sure? Kaelis nodded. They need to know what happened, how it happened, and they need to know we know. Rivah didn't stop her. She just said, I'm right here. Kaelis rose and made her way to the galley. The curtain parted, revealing Flight Purser Halden Meyer. Tall, lean, and efficient. His tie was neatly knotted, his posture textbook perfect. Yes, he asked, polite but cool. I'd like to file a formal complaint about the boarding process at Gate 49 and our treatment by Gate Agent Keene and Flight Attendant Vane. Kaelis said, voice steady. Halden blinked. Miss Solenne, is it? She nodded. I see. He folded his hands. Can you clarify what exactly you're alleging? I'm not alleging, Kaelis said. I'm reporting. His eyebrows lifted slightly. She continued. We were stopped from boarding without explanation. Our boarding passes were voided in front of a crowd. We were told our seats had been reassigned, while 2 other passengers white were quietly ushered on. When we asked for a reason, we were told it was security protocol, but no one has explained what security issue we posed. Halden's expression barely shifted, but Kaelis saw the flicker in his eyes. I will look into this, he said, but I assure you, our staff acted within regulation. That's not an answer, Kaelis said. That's a shield. Miss Solenne. Don't patronize me, she said. Louder now. We know who my father is. But this isn't about pulling strings. This is about the pattern. About people who look like us being treated like we don't belong. The nearby lavatory door opened, and a passenger glanced over, sensing tension. Kaelis didn't back down. Your crew humiliated us. We were made to feel like threats without cause. That's not just bad service. It's something worse. Halden's face was stone. I'll escalate your complaint to Captain Thorne. Do that, she said, and tell him I'll be speaking to legal after landing. Kaelis turned and walked back to her seat. The cabin buzzing now, whispering, watching. Rivah looked up. How'd it go? Kaelis sat down slowly. He's rattled, but he's not sorry. Just then, a voice came over the intercom. This is Captain Thorne. Would the passenger in seat 2A please make your way to the flight deck for a brief conversation? Kaelis looked at Rivah. They're summoning me. Sounds like it, Rivah said, sitting up straighter. You want me with you? Kaelis shook her head. No. Let's see how much they respect their own rules. She walked forward, heart thudding not from fear, but from purpose. The cockpit door opened, and Captain Merle Thorne stood just outside it. Older than she expected, with silver at his temples and sharp blue eyes. Miss Solenne, he said. Thank you for stepping up. She nodded. Captain. He motioned toward the bulkhead jump seat. She didn't sit. I'm told you've raised a serious concern, he began, and I respect that. But please understand, we have to maintain security standards across all passengers, no exceptions. And your security standard, Kaelis said calmly, includes removing black passengers without cause. Thorne stiffened. That's not what happened. Then explain it to me. Like I'm a colleague, not a child, not a disruption. The man looked at her long and hard. Then he exhaled. I'll be honest, you were flagged. Kaelis blinked. Flagged for what? He hesitated. Gate agent flagged your last name. Said it looked suspiciously similar to someone previously banned from a sister airline. Kaelis's mouth opened slightly. So you removed us based on a hunch about a last name? Thorne nodded once. Kaelis shook her head in disbelief. Would that have happened if our last name were Preston or Whitmore Thorne? Didn't answer, Kaelis said. I suggest you check our full travel record, our school, our business history, and yes, our father. Thorne's gaze sharpened. I know who your father is. Kaelis's voice dropped low. Then you know what kind of storm you're flying into. She turned and walked out, this time with no hesitation. Back at her seat, Rivah stood when she saw her. What did they say? Kaelis exhaled. They thought we were someone else. Someone banned. Based on our last name. Rivah's jaw dropped. That's it. Kaelis nodded. That's it. A long silence. Then Rivah said, Kay, it's time. Kaelis pulled out her phone. She didn't hesitate. She tapped her father's number. 1 ring. 2. Kaelis Draven's voice came through, calm but tense. Dad, she said, they flagged us, kicked us off, lied, and now they're pretending it's policy. Silence. Then send me the captain's name. Kaelis did. Draven replied, sit tight. No one lands this plane until I say so. Kaelis sat silently in her seat. The glow from her phone screen now dimmed. The call was over, but the ripple it started was just beginning. Rivah watched her sister with a mixture of awe and uncertainty. What did he say? Rivah finally asked, her voice low, almost reverent. Kaelis looked up slowly. He's not just angry. He's surgical. He told me, word for word. If the system won't hold them accountable, I will make the system pause. Rivah leaned back, exhaling. Damn, that sounds like Dad. For the first time since they boarded, the energy between them shifted. Kaelis wasn't the silent protector anymore. She was now the signal flare, the movement. And Rivah, used to being the one who roared, suddenly felt the steadiness in her sister's resolve. Just then, Flight Attendant Tyrek Vane passed by again, and this time he gave them a long, narrow look. Kaelis returned it level, unflinching. He moved on without a word. Behind the curtain, chaos was blooming. Meanwhile, in a sleek office tower nestled in the heart of San Francisco's financial district, Draven Solenne stood by the panoramic window of the Novus Air headquarters. The sun cast long golden lines across the polished floors. But inside the glass-walled executive suite, a storm was brewing. Draven turned from the window and addressed his executive assistant. Lock me in for a call with General Counsel. 5 minutes ago, he said curtly. His assistant, Kalen Muir, nodded and hustled out of the room. Draven's mind moved fast, but his face was unreadable. For decades, he'd built Novus Air to be an industry disruptor, one that was meant to rise above the small-minded, bureaucratic failures of older airlines. It was meant to be better. But now, his own daughters were living proof that the old sickness had made its way in through the back door. He didn't need more data. Kaelis's voice, steady but scorched, had told him everything. When the call connected to Ariel Damrosch, the airline's general counsel, he wasted no time. Ground NA777. There was a pause. Draven, are you sure that's mid-air over Colorado ground it? Reroute it. Make it an unscheduled stop. I want every supervisor on that plane relieved from duty and replaced before it touches down again. Ariel's breath caught. Sir, that's unprecedented. The FAA. Tell the FAA we're investigating a discriminatory incident with direct impact on the safety and rights of protected passengers. I'm pulling my CEO privilege clause. If they push back, they can take it up with my legal team. Understood. He ended the call. He wasn't finished. Back on the plane, Captain Morell Thorne sat stiffly in the cockpit, headphones crackling with incoming static. His co-pilot, Sloane Mercer glanced at him nervously. "Sir, we're being ordered to divert to O'Hare. Mid-flight. From corporate." Thorne frowned. O'Hare. That's not even on our alternate list. They've declared an emergency reroute. We're to land and stand down. The captain reached for the comms. "That's absurd. Who's issuing the override? Draven Solenne himself," Sloane said. Voice low. Captain Thorne swallowed. The CEO Sloane nodded. And the name of the passengers in question, Thorne already knew. In first class. Kaelis felt the pressure shift under her feet. Literally. She looked out the window. The plane was banking. "We're diverting," Rivah whispered. Kaelis's breath caught. "He's really doing it." Then came the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. Due to an unexpected directive from corporate headquarters, Flight NA-777 will be making an unscheduled landing at Chicago O'Hare International Airport. We apologize for the inconvenience." Murmurs shot through the cabin like electrical static. "Something's wrong. What's happening? Did someone get sick?" Kaelis stayed silent. But inside, something seismic had moved. Not because they were rerouting, but because it wasn't just about them anymore. Somewhere on this flight, a new mother would ask herself why two black girls got kicked off a plane for no reason. A businessman would remember how quiet they had been. A flight attendant might finally think twice. This wasn't just about her dignity anymore. It was about all the times people were told to take the next flight, the next seat, the next opportunity just because of how they looked. In the back galley, Tyrek Vane's phone buzzed with a secure message. "You are relieved of duty. Report to HR immediately upon landing." He went pale. "No, no, 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 gate agent." Nora Keene, who was sitting in jump seat 3L, received the same. Her mouth dropped open. "What the hell is going on?" she muttered. For once, there was no one to shield them. As Chicago's skyline drew near, Kaelis whispered to Rivah, "They're going to try to spin this. Say it was procedural. Avoid the truth." Rivah looked at her sister, admiration clear in her eyes. "Then you better be ready to tell your version louder." Kaelis smiled for the first time in hours. Not bitter, not cold, just quietly powerful. "I think I am." The wheels of Flight NA-771 touched down on the runway at Chicago O'Hare, with a jolt that snapped everyone back to reality. Passengers leaned toward the windows, murmuring, craning their necks to see through the oval-shaped portals. Something was off. Instead of taxiing toward a gate bustling with ground staff and airline banners, the plane rolled into a remote corner of the tarmac where 3 black SUVs were already waiting, engines humming. Inside the cabin, silence reigned. Kaelis sat still, her hands folded in her lap, her fingers pressed together tightly. The decision to call her father had set events in motion. But now, sitting there under the humming cabin lights, she wasn't so sure she was ready for what came next. Rivah leaned closer. "You good?" Kaelis nodded slowly, but didn't speak. Inside her chest, a quiet storm built part rage, part fear, part something she hadn't felt in years. Purpose. A metallic click broke the tension. The cabin doors opened. 2 uniformed staff members boarded, neither of them crew from the original flight. They walked with intention, bypassing the seated passengers, heading straight to the front of the plane. Captain Myril Thorne opened the cockpit and was immediately escorted out, his eyes wide, face pale. Sloane Mercer, the co-pilot, followed no resistance, just dazed compliance. Behind them, Tyrek Vane sat stone-faced in a jump seat. His phone buzzed again. Another message. HR review scheduled. Access suspended pending investigation. He shoved the phone into his bag. Unbelievable, he muttered, though even he didn't believe he was blameless. As the plane emptied row by row under strict supervision, passengers whispered anxiously, sensing something bigger than a routine flight delay had unfolded. Kaelis and Rivah were instructed to remain seated. When the final passengers had disembarked, a tall woman in a charcoal gray suit entered the cabin. She carried herself with firm elegance, every step precise, her jaw set in calm steel. "Ms. Solenne," she said gently, nodding at Kaelis. "I'm Marin de Laurentiis, Senior Legal Officer for Novus Air. I'm here to escort you and your sister to a secure location while this matter is formally addressed." Kaelis stood slowly. "Are we under investigation?" Marin shook her head. "You're the reason the investigation is happening." Outside, the wind whipped across the tarmac as Kaelis and Rivah climbed into one of the black SUVs. Their bags had already been retrieved. Inside the vehicle, a flat-screen monitor embedded in the seat ahead blinked to life. It was their father, Diversion Solenne, calling in from San Francisco. His face appeared expression grim, but proud. "You all right?" Kaelis nodded. "We are. But it's a mess." Draven sighed. "It's going to get messier." He turned slightly, revealing a wall behind him covered in screenshots, social media threads, news headlines, and a still image of Kaelis being denied entry at the gate. The photo had already gone viral. Novus Air Grounds plane. After discrimination accusation, CEO's daughters denied boarding power, race, and corporate responsibility collide. Twins speak out. We were treated like we didn't belong. Kaelis' stomach twisted. It's everywhere already. Draven leaned forward. "I've called for an external audit, full HR accountability, and public transparency. But it won't be enough unless you both speak. I can't tell your story for you. The world needs to hear it from you." Kaelis hesitated. Rivah broke the silence. "We'll speak, but not for attention. We'll speak because we're tired of being invisible until we're seen as a threat." Kaelis looked over at her sister, then back at the screen. "We'll do it together." Draven gave a tight nod. "I'll support you. But this time, you lead." Later that night, in a private hotel suite provided by the airline, Kaelis sat alone at the small writing desk while Rivah showered. A tablet lay in front of her, open to a blank note. She stared at the blinking cursor. She had told herself for years that being quiet was easier, that dignity meant enduring in silence. But the way that gate agent had looked at them, like they were in the wrong just for existing in a space that wasn't designed for them. She typed, "I didn't call my father because he's powerful. I called him because I was tired of shrinking in silence. And when the world watched, I wanted them to see how we rise not in rage, but in resolve." She paused, then saved the draft. Tomorrow, they would speak. But tonight, Kaelis would let herself feel it all: the humiliation, the fury, the fatigue, the pride, the quiet before the storm had passed. Now, it was time to let the truth fly. Morning came with an overcast sky. The city of Chicago buzzed just beyond the hotel's thick glass windows. But inside the room, Kaelis sat cross-legged on the floor, headphones in, watching last night's news coverage on her tablet. The footage looped security camera angles from the gate, a shaky passenger video capturing Rivah's raised voice, Kaelis' hand gripping her sister's sleeve. The commentary, however, missed the point. Words like incident, escalation, and celebrity CEO's daughters buzzed around without acknowledging what actually happened. Rivah exited the bedroom, towel wrapped around her head. "They're already rewriting it," she said, turning it into a PR case. Kaelis nodded. They're trying to focus on the power play, not the insult, not the pattern. A knock came at the suite door. Marin de Laurentiis entered briskly, holding a folder. Press conference is scheduled for noon, she said. It's optional, but I've seen what's coming down the pipeline. This story's no longer just yours. It belongs to the public now. Kaelis stood. We'll speak, but it has to be on our terms. Marin hesitated, then nodded. Then you'll want to see this. She opened the folder and spread a few printed emails and statements across the table. At the top, Novus Air internal HR reports, passenger complaints, anonymous employee feedback all previously buried, pattern of gate profiling, disproportionate targeting of passengers of color. Supervisor discouraged us from escalating claims involving difficult customers. Known unspoken rule, if they don't look the part, check them twice. Rivah's eyes narrowed. They've been doing this to people for years. And they knew, Kaelis said quietly. Marin nodded. The system was complicit. Outside, the press had gathered like a flock of vultures. When Kaelis and Rivah stepped out of the black car and into the wind, camera flashes erupted. Voices shouted over each other. Kaelis Rivah. Did you know your father would respond this way? Was this always a plan to expose the airline? Do you think race played a role? Kaelis raised a hand. We'll answer everything, but first, we'll speak. The two sisters stepped onto a small stage set near the entrance of the Novus Air Operations Building. Behind them, the company's logo hung on a banner pristine, corporate, but now stained by truth. Kaelis took the microphone. Her voice didn't tremble. Yesterday, my sister and I were denied the right to board a flight we paid for because we didn't look like we belonged in that line. That's not just about us. It's about everyone who's ever been asked to prove they're worthy of dignity. We didn't cause a scene. We were a scene, one designed by bias, executed by a system that confuses professionalism with prejudice. Rivah stepped forward next. They didn't see passengers. They saw assumptions, but they picked the wrong family to make invisible. We're not here for revenge. We're here to make sure no one else gets rerouted from their own humanity. Applause didn't follow immediately, just a heavy silence. A silence that forced the reporters to actually hear them. Then a slow, steady clap began at the back. From the maintenance crew, still in reflective gear. Then ground staff. Then a flight attendant, off duty. And then passengers. A ripple of recognition. And then applause. Back inside the building, Draven joined his daughters in a private boardroom. This time, he didn't look like a CEO. He looked like a father watching his daughters take the reins of a story he could no longer contain. I should have seen it earlier, he said. You did, Kaelis replied, but you thought fixing it meant hiding it. Draven lowered his gaze. We're not trying to burn the house down, Rivah said. We just want to tear out the rot. Draven gave a solemn nod. Then that's what we'll do. Starting now. He passed them a document full authorization to lead Novus Air's internal equity review, with outside oversight. No token committees. Real power. Kaelis didn't smile, but for the first time, she exhaled without tension. Later that night, back in the hotel, Rivah scrolled through messages, hundreds from people sharing their own stories of being stopped, questioned, dismissed. Kaelis lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling. It's more than I thought. It always is, Rivah replied. That's why it's so hard to look straight at it. Kaelis sat up. But we're looking now. The boardroom at Novus Air's headquarters looked like it hadn't changed in decades, sleek, metallic, polished to perfection. But beneath that sheen, tension pulsed like turbulence before a storm. Kaelis sat at the far end of the conference table, posture still, notebook closed in front of her. Beside her, Rivah leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, scanning the executives on the other side, like they were passengers refusing to buckle up. At the head of the table stood Rivah Solenne. His jaw was tight. He wasn't the invincible CEO today. He was a man attempting to dismantle a structure he had once helped maintain. "I've reviewed the preliminary reports," Rivah began, placing a thick folder on the table. "What we've found is not a personnel issue. It's cultural rot, from top to bottom." His words landed like hard rain. Silence hung in the room. "But let's be honest," Kaelis said, voice calm but resonant. "This didn't start at Gate 14. It started in hiring rooms, in memos, in performance reviews that overlooked bias as long as flights ran on time. A VP tried to cut in Bernard Klein, head of operations. With respect, the last thing we need is a media circus dictating internal reform." "Don't," Rivah said sharply. "This isn't a circus. It's accountability. And if that threatens you, maybe you should ask why." Rivah raised a hand. "Let's keep this constructive. We're here to discuss action." Kaelis opened the folder. Phase 1 of the equity audit includes a full review of passenger treatment complaints from the last 5 years. Names removed, patterns exposed, publicly, transparently. Murmurs erupted around the table. "You want to air internal data?" Bernard balked. "You'll destroy trust. We'll rebuild it," Kaelis replied, this time on something real. That evening, on flight NA 777, a Novus route from Chicago to Seattle Tierick Vane stood at the back of the plane, watching a black mother with 2 young children take their seats in row 2A and 2B. He felt the air shift. Eyes flicked toward them. One attendant whispered to another. Tierick's jaw tensed. Not today. When another crew member stepped toward the woman with a clipboard, Tierick intercepted. "They're fine," he said firmly. "Confirmed, checked, seated. Let them fly in peace." The attendant blinked. "I know what you were just," Tierick said. "Don't." The attendant turned away. Tierick turned back to the woman and smiled. "Welcome aboard. Back in the hotel." Kaelis couldn't sleep. She paced the room quietly, her mind turning over the arguments, the faces around that table, the storm still brewing. Rivah sat up in bed. "You're doing that thing where you rewrite the meeting 5 times in your head." Kaelis exhaled. "I keep wondering, are we changing things or just putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound?" Rivah was quiet for a moment. "We're making a crack. If it spreads, that's on them. But we made the crack." Kaelis nodded. "I just don't want this to end with us being paraded around and then forgotten." "It won't," Rivah said, voice steady, "because we're not waiting for anyone else to carry this. We're the ones flying the damn plane now." The next morning, Marin delivered another report. "There's resistance expected. Anonymous threats, smear attempts, the usual PR pushback from stakeholders worried about image." Kaelis read the quotes. One executive had called them emotional liabilities. Another, "They're too young to understand airline operations." Rivah snorted. "Translation: We liked you quiet." Kaelis was quiet for a beat, then said, "Good. Let them talk. The louder they get, the more people hear what they're really afraid of." She closed the folder. "We're not going back into silence." The press conference was set for 9 a.m. sharp. Kaelis stood backstage at Novus Air headquarters, staring into the mirror one last time. The blazer felt stiff. Her hands trembled slightly, so she tucked them behind her back. She wasn't scared, she was focused. But this was the part where her life would change again, publicly and permanently. Rivah stood beside her, adjusting her own collar, watching her sister's reflection. "You good," Kaelis smiled faintly. "Ask me again after the next 2 hours." "Just remember," Rivah said, her voice unusually soft, "they don't get to define us anymore." Kaelis nodded. "Then let's do it." They walked onto the stage, flanked by Draven and Marin. Reporters flashed their cameras like fireflies hungry for a story. Draven opened. "Thank you for being here. This isn't a press stunt. It's a reckoning." He stepped aside, and Kaelis took the mic. Her voice rang clear, but each word came from somewhere deep and personal. "Last month, my sister and I were denied boarding on flight NA725, not because of a logistical error, not because of any policy failure, but because of how we look. What happened wasn't an isolated incident. It was a symptom of a larger issue that this airline, like many others, has been afraid to confront." She paused. A ripple of murmurs moved through the crowd. "And we're not here to shame. We're here to change. Permanently." She turned toward a screen where a new logo blinked to life. "Novus Neck." "It's not just a rebranding," she continued. "It's a restructuring, a new division, led by us, with authority to dismantle and rebuild the policies that harm passengers of color, of different abilities, different faiths, backgrounds, and languages. No more apologies without action. This is action." Rivah stepped up next. "No more whisper campaigns. No more wait your turn. You see something unjust at 30,000 feet. You speak. You act. We're not passengers anymore. We're the architects of this system now. And we're not going anywhere." Later that night, the backlash arrived like a storm front. Social media was ablaze. Novus Next trended globally, but not all of it was positive. Too political. Just two rich girls stirring up drama. Bet they'll be gone in a month. Rivah read the comments with a clenched jaw. "I want to go online and scorch the earth." "Don't," Kaelis said quietly, scrolling through the hate. "We knew this would happen, but it still stings." "It does," Kaelis whispered, "but maybe that's the cost of being seen." Draven, watching from his office, leaned back in his chair. He hadn't spoken much during the press conference, letting his daughters lead. But now, staring at an email from the board marked urgent discussion request, he felt the weight of the cracks they had made in the old foundation. He dialed Marin. "They'll come for us harder now." Marin didn't flinch. "Then we hit back smarter. Kaelis and Rivah are the future. You're just the bridge." Draven smiled faintly. "And what if I collapse in the middle?" "You won't, because you've got them on the other side pulling you through." Meanwhile, Tyrek Vane received a message from an unfamiliar sender. "Thank you. My daughter was on your flight yesterday. She said you looked her in the eye and made her feel like she mattered." Attached was a photo, a little girl smiling by the window, hugging her stuffed animal. Tyrek stared at it for a long time. He thought back to his own first flight as a crew member, how he'd promised himself he'd be the one to change the script. Then the years hardened him. Survival had made him quiet. But this was the reason to speak again. Back in their hotel, Kaelis sat at the window, staring out at the planes taxiing below. The lights moved like constellations. "Are we ready for what's next?" she asked. Rivah came beside her. "I don't know, but I do know this whatever happens. We're not invisible anymore. We're not silent, and that's already a win." Kaelis leaned her head against her sister's shoulder. "We made the sky tremble." It had been exactly 30 days since Kaelis and Rivah Solenne stepped into the spotlight. since they'd spoken the truth the skies had tried to ignore, since Novus Air had been forced to reckon with the gravity of its own silence. Now, standing at the gate of flight NA-777 again, Kaelis felt the full circle tightening around her chest. Same flight number, same destination, same gate, but nothing was the same. Passengers filtered in with the usual mix of weary travelers, business types, vacationers with hopeful eyes. But something unspoken lingered in the air, a ripple of awareness. A shift. They knew the story now. Everyone did. Rivah leaned against a column, her leather satchel slung low, watching people without speaking. "You nervous?" Kaelis asked. "Always, but not afraid." They approached the gate counter together. The same gate agent who had once dismissed them, Noel Rakeen, was gone. Her termination publicly documented as part of Novus Next's new policy accountability rollout. In her place stood a young man with anxious eyes but a firm voice. He looked up as they approached. "Ms. Solenne, Ms. Solenne, your seats are ready, 1A and 1B. Kaelis studied him for a moment. "You're new?" He smiled, nervous. "Second week. I've read all the modules. And I read your story." She nodded. "Good. Keep reading." Once seated, Kaelis and Rivah settled into first class, not because it was owed to them, but because they had rebuilt the structure that had once rejected them. Flight attendants moved through the aisles more attentively now. No more careless gazes, no more assumptions. Small things, but to Kaelis, they were tectonic shifts. Mid-flight, a soft chime pinged from the cockpit. The intercom crackled. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. This flight marks the beginning of our airline's next chapter. You're flying Novus Next today, not just in name, but in spirit." This change didn't come from the top. It came from the courage of two passengers who decided not to accept injustice at 30,000 feet. Please join me in thanking them. Heads turned, murmurs stirred. A woman a few rows back clapped. Then another. The cabin applauded slow at first, then swelling. Rivah's face flushed. "You'd think I'd be used to this by now." Kaelis smiled gently. "It's not about being used to it. It's about remembering why it matters." As they descended through the clouds into deep sea, Kaelis pulled out a folded note she'd kept in her jacket since that day at the gate. It was a crumpled boarding denial form, signed and time-stamped. She looked at it for a long time, then handed it to Rivah. "What should we do with it?" Rivah considered, then tore it gently down the middle and let the pieces fall into the empty paper bag from their snack service. "That's the last time we carry someone else's prejudice with us." At baggage claim, they were met by Draven and Marin. No cameras this time, no reporters, just a quiet embrace between a father and his daughters. "I watched the live stream," Draven said. "The way you handled the captain's recognition, proud doesn't begin to cover it." Kaelis looked at him, eyes tender. "We're not done." "Of course not," he said. "But you've landed something bigger than a plane." A few weeks later, Kaelis sat on a panel at a national conference on transportation equity. She wasn't the keynote by choice. She wanted to listen, not dominate. Afterward, a young girl approached her. 12, maybe, braided hair, braces, a shy spark in her eye. "Are you Kaelis Solenne?" "I am. I watched the video of you and your sister. I want to be a pilot one day, but people say girls like me don't." Kaelis knelt to her level, then fly so high they can't keep up. The girl smiled like it was the first time she believed she could. Epilogue. 3 months later, Tyrek Vane now trains incoming flight attendants. His first slide reads, "Empathy is part of the uniform." Noel Rakeen publicly apologized in a reflective op-ed, opening with the words, "I failed to see the whole passenger. I will never make that mistake again." Captain Morel Thorne announced early retirement, citing a desire to leave space for newer voices. Draven Solenne stepped down as CEO. His final memo simply read, "The sky belongs to the future, and I've raised mine, and Kaelis and Rivah." They continue to fly, not just to travel, but to witness change in motion. Their boarding denial had once tried to ground them, but they turned it into an airlift for everyone still waiting at the gate. Sometimes the loudest moments aren't the ones that go viral. They're the quiet choices made when nobody's clapping, like staying calm when disrespected, like standing up for yourself and still leaving space for others to grow. Kaelis and Rivah didn't fight with fists. They didn't scream. They simply told the truth. And the world listened? But what if they hadn't? What if they believed the lie that said, "Sit down, stay quiet, you don't belong"? This story is a tribute to every person who's ever been told you're not enough and found the courage to say, "I am." It's a mirror held up to systems that still judge by color before character. And it's a reminder that every seat on every flight, in every room, should be earned by worth, not whiteness. If this story moved you, leave a comment with your thoughts. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to our channel so you never miss stories that speak truth with heart, because we're not done flying yet, and the next landing might just change everything. See you in the next video. Stay grounded, stay bold, stay human.